3.
I speak for the trees have no tongues. Dr. Seuss. I grew up in Thneedville, and I'm sure a lot of you did too. And I think that it's about time that we stand up and start fighting to rehabilitate our environment. And we can do this by understanding our history and the story of the Onceler, how our environment affects us, and what we can do to help. Now, for anyone who is unfamiliar, the Onceler began as just any other entrepreneur, and he was on the search to find the perfect material for his Thneed. And eventually, he found it, right here in what is now Thneedville. Now, his business began ethically and environmentally friendly. He would simply pluck the tufts off of the truffula trees to weave into his Thneed. Most of this was thanks to the Lorax, that he didn't do any damage to the environment or the wildlife that lived there. But soon, he turned his back on his environmentally friendly ways, under the influence of his family and his own greed. He began cutting down trees with no regret or remorse, and he built a giant factory to further pollute the environment. And eventually, he cut down the very last truffula tree. Now, not only did he have no more material to make his Thneed out of, he had done considerable damage to the environment. Without any trees, there was no fresh air for us to breathe, and there was no housing for the wildlife that lived there. Now, this environmental crisis set the stage for Mr. O'Hare to begin his own corporation, selling bottled fresh air to the citizens of Thneedville. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, why should I care? How does this affect me? Well, Mr. O'Hare creates thousands of plastic bottles to fill with fresh air and to sell to all of us. But what happens to those bottles when they're empty? Are they being recycled? They're not. They're simply being left to further pollute our environment. Now, the plastic bottles, they allow chemicals to seep into our soil and our water sources. And on top of that, it's very dangerous for our wildlife if they accidentally eat them. It can make the wildlife really, really sick, or it can even kill them. Now, another thing about Thneedville, we're notorious about our excessive battery use and all of our artificial plants. Now, batteries are just as bad as plastic, and similarly, they pollute our soil and our water with dangerous chemicals. And we experience our life without ever seeing a real animal or any sort of wildlife, really. Now, after hearing some of this, I'm sure you're wondering what you can do to help. Well, we can begin by planting more trees. Having trees will produce fresh air without having to further pollute the environment with plastic, and it will provide safe housing for any animals to come and live if and when they feel safe to do so. And lastly, we can work to support ethical businesses. Now, Mr. O'Hare has created a corporation capitalizing on this environmental crisis we're experiencing and the citizens of Thneedville, only for his personal gain. Now, he has created a prime example of an unethical business. But if we begin supporting ethical businesses who have respect for the citizens of Thneedville and the environment, we can ensure that the people in charge of Thneedville always keep our best interests in mind. In conclusion, I believe that it's time we start fighting to rehabilitate our environment. And we can do this by understanding our history and why it happened, how our environment affects us, and why and how we can help. Now, I would like to leave you with a quote from Dr. Seuss. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not.